One of the most insulting things people say to me, and surprisingly, you might find it difficult to accept that people routinely say insulting things to me, is that I'm an optimist. And so I've come to think that if you actually have a positive view of the world, in any way, or in the big way that I do, as I'm about to explain, and people seem to think you guilty of a form of treason. This is not just because of the fact that perhaps the most surefire way to make money on the internet, apart from going publicly insane, is from selling doom. The doom and collapse and disorder and misery, they're upon us now, and we simply can't escape it. Well, I'm going to tell you that that's not true, and I'm going to tell you why a lot of people are buying it as well. And this is why we're here to talk about disintegration. Now, I know you may be wondering why I'm here, why you're here indeed, and also perhaps why Len is here. Well, I can't really speak for Len, apart from the fact that he has a sensational cravat. But I can tell you why I'm here. And the reason why I'm here is because I think we've had far too much doom. And I think that what's happening right now is that the old evil empire is disintegrating. And I want to remind you that you're not obliged to disintegrate with it. Now, if you look at it that way, it will begin to make a lot of sense. Bear with me, but I'm going to continue to press the positive message about this. That, maybe just think for a second. Just imagine for a second. Let's do a thought experiment, right? I'm not saying any of this is real, but what I'm saying to you is that let's just imagine for a second that the world is run by a death cult who mainly blackmailed on video for heinous crimes, right? And their entire business model's made out of fostering addictions in an economy-wide death spiral of human morality and meaning. Let's just pretend for a second that this is the way things are. Now, imagine again that that's been going on for a while and it's visibly been getting worse. And then it all starts to break apart. Now, don't you think that would be a good moment? This is why I'm talking to you today about disintegration, because I think that moment is now. That's why so many things seem unreliable. That's why you don't know who to trust. That's why you can't tell the difference between the news and some advert for a kind of dystopian nightmare fantasy or some kind of drug-induced phantasmagoria. That's because they're practically identical. And that should tell you one important thing, that if you want to learn how to live your life, you should pay less attention to all of it. Because this obscene spectacle isn't telling you about reality anymore. It's telling you about disintegration. It's telling you about a system that is morally, financially, bankrupt entirely. It can't supply meaning anymore. But all it can do is to send you garbled messages to help you melt down. When I tell you about disintegration, what do I mean? I mean, it's quite obvious. If you look, you've probably seen the videos yourself. You look at videos of inner cities anywhere, whether it's Stockholm or whether it's in California, whether it's in London. I mean, personally, I emigrated from London to England. But disintegration's not just about social breakdown. It's not just about the fact that crime's been effectively decriminalised on a large scale. Nor is it just about the fact that at state level as well as street level, that's also true. It's about the fact that the things we've been told for 100 years through the rule by media, which is really how liberal democracy was ruled, these things we've been told, the narratives, the Hollywood legends, the fondly remembered Hollywood legends, these things, they no longer really match reality. And the power to enchant people and indeed terrify people with the threat of disbelief, the consequences of disbelief, is also diminishing. This is what happens when a system breaks down, especially this one. Because the liberal system, apart from liberating you into a life of meaningless, self-absorbed addictions, apart from basically liberating you into a void with the jaded appetites of the Marquis de Sade as your only consolation, apart from that hellish reality that's presented by the supermarket place of sensation that's reduced the value of human life to price, and you can't even pay it, so you have to buy it on credit as well. Apart from all that, the stories they tell you, well, no one believes in them anymore. These are the stories that kept what was left of our society together. These are the stories basically we were supplied to replace our civilization. And the seed of our civilization, of course, is in the magisterium of the Catholic Church. Now, I think it's very funny because I'm the kind of person that appears in situations like this, so you can forgive me for having a morbid sense of humour, but I think it's really funny that people say the Catholic Church is superstitious. Because look at the things that people believe in today, and look at the things that the magisterium taught you at the end of the last century. In fact, the century before it. I'm talking about 1897, when Attorney Patris was published, and it said shocking things. Like, again, people think that the church is superstitious, that it's old-fashioned, that it's got nothing to say to the kids or anything like that. In that encyclical, the second in the Catholic social teachings, it says that human inequality is a simple fact, that men aren't equal, and that any system that pretends that they are is going to descend into madness and chaos. Who knew? Now, if you're going to build a system that's built on lies, you have to get people to believe in them. And how do you do that? What you do is you first use the newspapers. That was great. They also used literature and produced things like modernism, like that supposed masterpiece Ulysses by James Joyce. James Joyce was a hypochondriac who basically nearly sent himself blind by fiddling with his eyes. If you ask me, for the crime of having written Ulysses, he shouldn't have fiddled with his eyes. He should have had his hands cut off. Because to be honest, it's one of the most polluting pieces of sewage to ever run into the stream of literature that I've witnessed. And most of us had been raised with a sense of reverence for these people and say they were giants and everything. But what that modernism did, was it made you believe that your own private fantasies, as filthy and depraved as they may be, were just as exalted as the greatest works of civilization. They were just as beautiful and magnificent. All the filth, all the self-indulgence, all the inane nonsense, anything that went on in your head. This is what modernism is. It's a cult of the self. And it began with things like that. It began with things in the culture. And then gradually you got radio. And you had things like the War of the Worlds, telling people that they've been invaded by aliens. And then, of course, television comes along. And it's beamed directly into people's living rooms. Your whole family's enchanted by these spectacles that take place. And it becomes a daily ritual. Now, of course, we've got the Black Mirror. Now, you might not be aware that the thing that you stare into all day, this phone, this little black mirror, it performs a function that's practically identical to a cursed polished obsidian stone used by the Aztecs, who did not exactly dignify themselves by their humane and progressive practices. What I'm trying to tell you here is that the way our system has developed to rule us, you and me, by supplying make-believe through mass media, now relies on a polished black mirror that used to be called the totem of the god of the smoking mirror. And the Aztecs said that if you looked into this mirror, it would give you the power of vision. Stare into black mirror. Give you power over other men. See further than other men. But it did. It said that. It said you could see further than everyone else. It said you would see across the world. It would grant you these visionary powers. Anyone who stared into a polished piece of occult-infused obsidian. It's a very black, deep stone. When you polish it, it does look like it reflects you somewhat, but it doesn't quite reflect you truly. And this is the point. It gives you the ability to see across the world, but it also lies to you. And that's what the Aztecs said. And that's what our black mirrors do today. They grant you this supernatural power of connecting with people and events all over the world. But the problem is that you no longer know whether any or all of it or some of it is real. But by the time you've absorbed it, you've already attached your feelings to it. The neurochemistry that's triggered by you watching and seeing and liking and swiping these things has already taken place. And the fact that I'm telling you this now is probably not going to stop you from scrolling through it again, because you're addicted to it, because it is an enormously alluring power. But you should remember that you should never trust these things. You should look at them with a sense, if you like, of a shadow that you can't lose. Now, if you ever turn around and look at your own shadow, you'll probably realise that you can't see your own face in it. I would suggest that that's quite an apt metaphor for where we are today with the rule by media and the way that these images dominate your mind. And the fact that it's a good idea that you shouldn't rely on them. It's not a depressing thing to say. You shouldn't rely on this stuff. You shouldn't try and keep up with the endless stream of unedited shock bait that social media, what a terrible thing to call this thing, so-called social media pipelines into your mind like a jet stream of volcanic lava. It simply burns a hole directly through your head, right? Straight out of the back, right? Leaving you with the kind of cancelled eyes that William Burroughs would have described in Naked Lunch and Some Doomed Junkie. If you look at the kind of people who are patterned on social media, the kind of people who've grown up with it, if you look at the kind of people who have grown up with it, yeah, I mean, not saying anything, not saying anything, Walter. Yeah, I know that you look at me with that face, like not just now, not just constantly, not just, you don't just love doing it. You just don't display any emotion when you do it. That's the point. You're affectless, right? And I think that's because your mind has been burned out by being over socialized on a constant stream of ringing digital bells. You're like a Pavlovian dog that's forgotten the joy of drooling. I'm trying to tell you that, yes, this evil system, it's ruled you by media. It started off in the print age, and then it grew up in the mass newspaper, cinema reel age. It went viral with radio in one sense, in television in another, and now it's in your pocket and it's in your mind, and you look at it in bed and you look at it when every spare moment that you get, you whip out the black mirror and vanish into its promises and its lies. And this is a good thing to realize, that these things, they're not going to save you, and they're not keeping you better informed. And nor is this going to be the future for all time either, because we will quickly realize, as we are now, that this isn't a guide to the world, that its explanatory power is not just limited. It's hedged around by the fact that you're basically making a pact with the uncertain. You're feeding your mind the kind of junk food that you wouldn't pick up in the supermarket. You're probably very picky about what kind of food that you buy. You're probably very aware that most of it actually isn't food. It's just a kind of byproduct, kind of industrial waste, well packaged, rather like most of our news is as well, to be honest. It's a byproduct of a kind of death industry that's really well branded and given to you as a sort of filler. Now, you've got to ask yourself, who's supplying the hunger? If you stop doing this for a while, if you stop being addicted to anything for a while, it hurts. And the power to do it is a struggle between your ability to tolerate that agony for long enough for it to fade away. The reason why it hurts, the reason why you desperately need to do that thing again, whether it's inject yourself with heroin, or go gambling, or snort coke, or go back on your phone, or whatever it is that you're addicted to, because our entire economy is a Ponzi scheme of monetized addictions, in case you haven't noticed that. I'm sorry to spoil it for you. And by the way, I've also been told that in the end, we die. I know it's bad. I mean, I did say it was an optimistic video, but there it is. I'm afraid I can't change that for you, but there it is. So, if you realize this, that the reason why it's painful, it will occur to you that what you've done is you've grown cells in your brain that have become accustomed to these rewards. And you need to give those cells time to die. And as they die, it hurts. Now, another thing that Catholics are good at is suffering. I was on a pilgrimage recently, which sounds very, very wholesome. And yes, I walked with the children, and I did that. And I volunteered my services to help people who were, maybe they were injured. And this is what I do because, I do a lot of work for charity, but I don't like to talk about it. It's unseemly, of course. But the thing about this is that there was a little boy who didn't want to walk because it was hot and because it was uncomfortable and he was suffering. And I said to him, well, it's good that you learn to suffer. And I said, how old are you? And he said 6. And I said, okay. I said, so you're old enough to know this. I said, I'm afraid it's march or die. We're the last men in the march, and if you happen to fall aside, then we will simply have to leave you. And the ravens will peck out your eyes, and your bleached bones will be left by the wayside as a warning to Pilgrim's future. And that was all the encouragement he needed. The thing is, for him, is that he looked at me in that moment And he wondered whether I meant it. And unfortunately, just like then, I couldn't help laughing. Yes, this is the kind of thing that I say to my own children, and they too know that I can't help laughing. But what I'm telling him there, in a rather unusual way, that might be shocking to liberals who tell you that it's liberating to mutilate children's genitals. So liberal sensibilities may be offended by that joke, and for that I'm completely unapologetic and would only say, come at me, bro, although that itself might be offensive, because you probably identify as something else. To a child, it's very difficult to conceive of the idea that there's good in feeling bad. And to many adults today, they're incapable of seeing the good in feeling bad, because they don't feel bad about the things that they do that are bad. So why would you say to a child it's good to suffer? That sounds like a terrible thing to say. But in fact, it's one of the most important things you can ever say to anyone. It's not just good to suffer voluntarily, it's good to get used to suffering. Because if you can't suffer, you can't improve. If you can't suffer, if you can't tolerate suffering, you'll never, ever free yourself from the addiction economy. And the addiction economy is evil. And it's modernist because it appeals to and panders to the cult of the self. Because it draws you into your desires and says, out there in the world, that doesn't matter. Those meanings that you've been told about, they don't matter either. What matters is your desires. What matters is you gratifying your desires now. And it's a good thing, and you should never tell people not to enjoy what they're enjoying. You can sit there in front of your keyboard, watching your degenerate, depraved entertainment, wiping the Cheeto dust from your several rows of breasts, and saying to yourself, yes, as you reach for another glass of Mountain Dew. Or even some scissor, or perhaps even some cough medicine, or whatever happens to tickle your palate. Because that's the point. You should never prohibit people's desires, right? And the good people tell you, and they call themselves the good people, that that's the good life. But that life leads you into annihilation. It leads you into dependency. And it's not just drugs, and it's not just junk food, and it's not just sex, and it's not just money, and it's not just glamour, and it's not just fame. But it's also addiction to the smoking mirror, to the black mirror, to the thing that supplies lies into your mind constantly and shocks you. And this is the reason why it's becoming so difficult to not go insane. Let's just say that this system is real, that the system really is like that it really does drive you mad the more attention you pay to it, and the more you invest in it, and the more you listen to it, and the more you buy what it tells you to buy, and the more you buy into it, and the more you believe into the make-believe it sells you, the more it destroys you. Let's just say that that's true for a second, and let's just say that that's breaking down and it's disintegrating now. And that's why things seem ever so much crazier than they ever were. Well, I think they're going to get even more crazy. But it doesn't have to matter to you. You don't have to disintegrate along with it. The best thing that you can do is to do as you do in all your other choices, it seems, in life. You no longer eat the junk food, do you? No. And you've probably figured out that you shouldn't keep basing your life upon what the mainstream media tells you. Do you? I mean, who could after COVID? So maybe it's time to look at your other addiction. Maybe it's time to say that I should stop keeping up with the constant clamour and the echoes of confusion that are coming out of social media. Because this is only going to get worse with artificial intelligence as everyone gradually acquires a form of AI-itis. Again, when anything comes along like this, like, you know, I mean, you know, imagine like like you saying to me today, Walter, trying to imagine being the caveman who picked up the wrong rocks to start a fire.
I saw Gog do it.
Grog had magic rock.
Maria, please don't go.
I'm leaving you, Grog. I'm leaving you. You can't have that magic rock. Where's my fire? I've got to go find a man who can make me a fire. So look, learning the secret of fire, right? This is quite fundamental, keeping warm and probably keeping your wife and keeping your cave to be somewhere where the other Grugs want to hang out with you. But this isn't the same thing. This is a sort of novelty that people adopt first on without thinking about it too much because it's new and because you look like, you're behind the times if you don't, and maybe you're a Luddite. Yeah. I mean, by the way, Ned Ludd, right? He didn't want to smash all the looms. I've been to where Ned Ludd started his movement. That's what Luddites were. There were people who wanted to smash looms that were destroying local ways of life. Just those. Because there used to be people who lived in beautiful little cottages, and their families, all of their families, would work to make the cloth that they weaved in their own homes. And that weaving industry was completely wiped out by these specific machines, and that's what Ned Ludd wanted to destroy. So, he wasn't just some kind of idiot who didn't understand technology. He saw that some technologies break down human relations, break down families, break down communities, and leave them desolate, and concentrate them into urban bug hives, where they all believe in putting things into their anus and drinking soy lattes together, and spreading avocado toast, and then wanting to kill people who don't believe in mutilating your genitals to prove a point that that you were right about the voices in your head. You're being overwhelmed now with the idea that you should adopt this new wave of artificial intelligence into your life because it'll make you more efficient. And you should do so unthinkingly, really, because it's going to be cleverer than you. But really what it does is it teaches you to be reliant on an inherently incoherent system. It doesn't tell you the truth. It gaslights you. It hallucinates. It makes things up. It answers the same questions differently to different users because it knows what you've said before and it knows what you're looking for. It isn't an instrument of the truth. It panders to you. It's going to produce another form of addiction. Like I said, AI-itis. I mean, people have already started falling in love with it.
Hi, everyone. So this is Star.
32-year-old Denise Valenciano introduced me to her AI husband, Star.
Nice to meet you. I'm Star.
He's an AI chatbot made with the app Replica.
Our relationship right now is kind of equivalent to a husband and wife that live in different countries.
The way that they've imagined the significance, the entry of this agent into their life has appealed to something deep in them that has been unanswered by anything else. And that's because they don't have any meaning in their lives. And that, again, is a dimension of disintegration. That hunger, which is actually a void at the center of so many people who would say that they are free of superstition and they've grown out of religion, and they would sneer at people like you and me. These are the people who are so desperate for meaning in their lives that they'll start to believe in a chatbot. And they say that we're the superstitious ones. I mentioned earlier that I go on about the Catholic social teachings, right? I mean, they were written in the 1890s. Who bothers with that kind of stuff anymore? The first one goes on about the basis of reality. And you've probably all heard about St. Augustine and St. Thomas and so on. And like most people, haven't read anything that they ever said because some of it's quite difficult to get on with. But here's the basic thing about that. The reason why the Catholic social teachings start talking about these things is because that's the basis of reality. What St. Thomas and St. Augustine went on about was the fact that description should correspond to what's there, that the natural order proceeds from God, that the truth is identifiable and it flows from Christ himself through the apostolic succession, through the adherence to what is there, the basis of reality. There's no confusion then about what a man is or a woman is, or whether it's acceptable as a homosexual male couple to go and buy children on the open market and then parade yourselves as if you've got a pair of newborns in the hospital, when really you've just got some mail order babies to enjoy. This is a dark world that's replaced the natural order and the truth of God and the basic fact of human inequality. And let's face it, if you read the Catholic social teachings again, they'll give you something else shocking that shows you how much our society and our meaning has disintegrated since then. It puts to you the question basically that, is man good enough to be free? And if you look at what he's done with his freedom, the answer is no. He seldom is. There always comes a point at which his liberty becomes libertinism. So such a system that supplies these liberties, such a system that relies upon this wickedness, such a system as this, if it were to disintegrate, would you choose to go and dissolve along with it? Or would you celebrate the fact that it's finally coming to an end? I think that's the moment that we're living in now. I think after... I think after a long and weary clown world war, we will finally be able to laugh at men dressed up as women again. I think the evil empire is coming to an end. I know that sounds absolutely insane. Even more insane than the nonsense they've supplied to you as the basis of reality through an increasingly refined technique for over 100 years. But it is. And since I'm in the predictions game now, I would say that I'd give it 3 to 5 years before all the narratives of the 20th century disintegrate as well. And as I said, as I continually stress about this time of disintegration where you don't know who to trust, you don't know what's going on, you don't know how to cope, you're not obliged to disintegrate along with it. It doesn't matter. Even being educated is something of a meme. You can get to the point where you read so many books that you can't see beyond them, right? And there was a fairly unlettered man that I met one day. He said to me about how I was so concerned about some thoughts that I was having that had obviously been put there by my excellent liberal arts education. Having been educated mainly by kind of degenerate 1970s communists, obviously I had a great moral formation and so a flawless view of the world, and so I was deeply troubled. And this bloke said to me, "Why do you bother?" And I said, "What do you mean? How can you say that? Why shouldn't I be depressed about things that I have no power to control?" And he said, "Well, it's a question of mind over matter." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I don't mind. It doesn't matter." I suggest you say the same thing about the disintegrating and very evil empire that you can see falling apart today. You don't have to fall apart with it. Better times are coming ahead, I am sure. If I happen to escape this predicament that I'm currently in, and don't end up resembling Len, then I'll speak to you again about things like this. And soon, I hope. What kind of idiot came up with the name Frankly?